What's up, everybody? It's your boy.
How kind are your thoughts? Hot sun sees all the lines. You can hold on tight to the key, pretend you're not. I guess that's just what we're waiting for.
AKA Reed from Shameless Nerd. Today's video is about this channel, me, and you watching this. If you end up liking this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. You can also join these beautiful people on the screen right here by clicking the join button to get exclusive access to members-only videos, get main channel videos early, and support the channel directly. You can also join the Shameless Nerd Discord, Selvamer to all you sweet little Discord nerds in the server already, if you know, you know. And you can email me with any questions, comments, concerns, or pictures of book reports that you made in 3rd grade at readfromshamelessnerd@gmail.com. All right, let's get into it. This video will contain 3 parts, each of which only tangentially related to each other and to the video as a whole. The first part will be me talking a little bit about the channel, why it exists, getting a little like existential and philosophical. The second part will be a Q&A section that I'm literally so excited about. It's insane. All the questions came from members of the Discord, and I've linked to a bunch of their channels and Substacks and social medias. Please support them. They're awesome and very talented and very cool. And then the third part of this video will be an update on my novel that I'm writing. If you only have interest in 1 or 2 of these sections, please feel free to hop around using the little timestamps in the progress bar or in the description. So, what's up? Little change of scenery here for you guys. So, first of all, this video is technically the 2nd installment in a series I'm going to start doing on the channel, but I didn't think of it as a series until now. And that is that upon every major milestone that the channel hits, this one being the milestone of hitting 15,000 subscribers, I'm going to do one of these videos. Each one will have 3 parts. The first being just like a general update on the channel, a quick little ramble about something meta or self-referential in some way. The second being a Q&A, and the third being an update on my novel. So, for this first one, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to every single person who has subscribed to this channel. Every creator or creative worth a shit in the history of the world has said, thanks so much for supporting me, or whatever. And of course, that's a nice thing to do, but I just, like, it feels a little different to me. This channel is the culmination of literally my entire existence. I have wanted to make stuff and have an audience to share it with since I was conscious. I've talked about it before, but I have been drawing, writing, singing, making short films, poetry, skits, routines, visual art, everything that you can imagine for my entire life. And it's like, I mean, other than my son, it is the only thing that makes me feel like my life has meaning. So when I say thank you for supporting the channel, it's not just like, woohoo, number go up, bigger, yay. It's like, thank you for validating my existence. And it just means the world to me. And it means even more to me because this channel kind of breaks a lot of the rules of the modern internet, and it's become what it is anyway. And that's what's most important to me. I've made videos about kids movies. I've made videos about death. I've made videos about Andrew Jackson. I've made videos about famous pieces of literature and existential philosophy and getting off your phone and Nintendo. The only through line in the random shit that I make is that I'm writing the scripts, I'm editing the videos, and they're about stuff that I want to talk about. On modern YouTube, it is very, very hard to build an audience without adhering to several almost steadfast rules. And those are to find your niche, which, by the way, is pronounced either way. Every time I say niche, I get comments about, it's actually pronounced niche. What are you, like? It is pronounced niche, but it's also pronounced niche. Like, look it up. Like just look. Like, I am an English teacher. Whatever. But to find your niche and then stay in your niche, find out what viewers of things in your niche want to see, and then to make those videos over and over again. Make your videos loud and exciting. Make your small insular topic as wide-reaching and generalist as possible, and don't step outside your lane. On modern YouTube, you make the same video over and over again, and the algorithm tends to punish creators who either don't upload on a regular schedule, who try to reach outside their demographic, who are inconsistent in subject matter, or who don't adhere to attention-grabbing analytical behavior guidelines in their videos. And I super don't do a lot of those things, but you guys watch me anyway, and it's just insane. Like, my intros are sometimes 2 minutes long. I have a whole section of my videos about a random topic unrelated to the subject of the video at the end. The subjects range wildly. It's just super humbling and meaningful to me that it has worked anyway. Because that's what I want my channel to be, ultimately. As it's grown, I've thought about that a lot, about what I want it to be. And what I want it to be is an example that you don't have to follow the rules, that there still is and always will be a place for art and earnestness in genuine creativity on the internet, that the original dream of the internet is still alive in some way. And if I want my channel to be an example of that, I have to practice what I preach. And so I still do and will always continue to just make shit about shit that I want to make shit about. And you should too. Like, I know that I will always have viewers who subscribe because they like the advice I gave about modding a Nintendo DS or my analysis of the Angry Birds movie, and they don't really care about any of this high-minded, self-indulgent nonsense. And they just want to see more Angry Birds analysis. It doesn't really work. It doesn't really work for that one, but you get the point. You know what I'm saying? And I'm always going to make stuff in those worlds because those are things that I'm interested in, and I can't shut my mouth even if I wanted to. But these milestone videos will just be an occasional thing for viewers of the channel to whom this idea means something, to people who want to see life in the internet, to watch someone who's a real person pursuing a dream and being cringy in being creative and weird and not caring and hopefully succeeding anyway. Because I mean, I'm a middle school teacher. The only real contribution I actually think I can have in the world is helping people see their capability and value in the world. Then that's like as esoteric and self-indulgent and corny an idea as I can actually believe in. So anyway, thank you guys so much for everything. 15,000 is unbelievable. On to part 2. Relatedly unbelievable, the Shameless Nerd Discord just hit 150 members, and I have already learned so much from you guys in there, and I've enjoyed so many fun and impactful conversations in there. I don't have a ton of experience on Discord, but in my limited experience, I think our little server is just one of the coolest little corners of the internet that there is. And on that note, I wanted to answer a bunch of questions that I got from the Discord members. I haven't prepared responses for these or even really thought about them much because I wanted the answers to be genuine and like off the cuff, I guess. I'll be editing out a ton of but I think it'll be more fun that way. Oh shit, he's going off script. All right, this first question is from Egg. What and who are your inspirations for making visual art? For visual art, like my paintings and stuff, I'll kind of flash a few of my paintings on the screen here. Honestly, like Dr. Seuss, maybe? Like, I think that would be like my main influence visually. I like pretty colors and kind of like sunset-y kind of things, and then I like having like a little fantasy sort of whimsy kind of in there. So most of my stuff is kind of pink and purple and blue landscapes with like otherworldly kind of shit in there. The cherry blossom tree is probably my favorite painting that I've done, but yeah, this one that I did the other day that is right here is one that I'm really proud of just because I think it like captures that idea that I'm talking about. But yeah, that would be kind of my main inspiration for visual art. And I don't do as much of it as I wish that I would. One that I do on the side a little bit more than the other stuff that I do. And then I do a lot of like cartoony kind of doodling and stuff too. But I do that more, like that's, I'm not going to show anybody those. Good question. Thank you, Egg. Okay, this question is from Platy. He's one of my favorite people in the in the Discord. Platy says, "What's a hot take of yours about something random that isn't particularly controversial?" So I have a lot of hot takes, and I'm struggling to decide which one to share. I would say one that is not particularly controversial that I'm pretty passionate about is that the GameCube is like the greatest console, the greatest home console of all time. I'm a big GameCube girly. And it's my favorite, and there are only like 700 games for the GameCube, and sort of the limited supply or the limitation in the library, I think, makes like the games feel a little more special. And the console was hard to develop for, so the developers that made games for it tended to put a little more, or they like tended to care a little bit more, I think. Nintendo was trying at the time to have a console be carried by the games and not kind of like flash of the console, and then they just completely like were like, oh well, that didn't work. So then they made the Wii, which was all about shovelware garbage games and like a gimmick. But the GameCube being the greatest, the best home console of all time is probably my hottest take that isn't gonna like really piss anybody off, I don't think. Platy's second question here is my favorite dinosaur and why. My favorite dinosaur by far is the Pteranodon, which without hesitation. The Pteranodon is the largest thing that ever flew, and that would be the reason why. I think that's extremely cool. Also, I just learned recently, even though the Pteranodon has always been my favorite dinosaur, that it's not a dinosaur, that it's a pterosaur, and that those were a separate thing, that like the pterodactyl and the Pteranodon and like the like Microraptor and shit, like that these weren't dinosaurs, that they're pterosaurs. I ain't an archaeologist, all right? I don't know shit about shit. But the pteranodon. All right, moving on. All right, this next question is from Pedro Golima. Pedro asks, how do you go about your kids' consumption of media, and do you think that impeding them from consuming popular slop can lead to FOMO? So I have he's almost 4-year-old son. I have a he's almost 4-year-old son, and we don't do any like small screen stuff, but he watches TV. It's, as much as I would like to pretend that I just lock him in a room with a book and he's like reading at 4 years old or something. Like, we watch TV. I have my entire SpongeBob quotes are like a load-bearing tenet of my personality. And so we watch TV, we watch movies. I don't think that, so speaking from my own experience, I used to be very heavily on social media, I was a consumer of everything, every piece of content that exists. And when I quit, it was the easiest thing that I've ever quit, the social media. Now, getting off my phone, and I'm sure there'll be a question about that, has been a lot harder in general. But getting off of social media and consuming that like short form content kind of stuff, like sensory based stuff, I don't feel like I was missing any of it. And so he's not old enough to express any resentment. He's not old enough to like know that he's missing anything, even if he did feel that way. But I don't think that he will. I really don't, because he loves the stuff that we watch. Like, we've been watching Owl House, which was recommended to me by another member of the Discord, which is just like a really awesome show. And it's like, it's a little mature for a 4-year-old. A lot of like the phrasing and stuff that goes over his head. But I'm a big believer in the value of plot, the value of like an overarching storyline that requires like memory and like attention. And there aren't a lot of kids cartoons that do that. And I think that's why Owl House, Adventure Time, Regular Show, but why those kids shows, those ones in particular, Steven Universe, why those kids shows in particular have like resonated with adult audiences is because it's a real story. And I think that there's a real importance to that. And so that's my emphasis. In TLDR, I let him watch, he watches TV. We watch a lot of Pixar movies and that kind of thing. But we don't watch like sensory-based content like Cocomelon or obviously like stuff on phones. And he doesn't do any short screen time. I don't think that will lead to FOMO. I really don't. I think in middle school, I think that it could. Like some of my students that don't have phones, I think that sometimes they will express like feeling a little bit left out and resentful to their parents. But even at a middle school level, they don't care as much as you might think that they would. They really don't. So yeah. Wow. Okay. So this is a really good question that I'm a little intimidated by. So Pedro's second question here says, what do you think about the new Superman movie and its general impact on people making hopelessness being seen as something not as cool anymore by the general public and making hope something more accepted? So I've kind of hinted at the idea that I'm not a superhero guy. I haven't seen the new Superman movie. I've never seen a Marvel movie other than, like bits and pieces on like TNT, randomly or whatever at night. It's not my thing. So I don't know about this movie, but the concept, if that's a concept that's like kind of come out of the Superman movie, I love that idea. I made a video about the power of optimism, like as a fundamental philosophy, and I love that. I think that's really cool. And I think that's like a super important message that like in the modern day when things feel so dire and hopeless, that holding on to hope is really important and powerful and awesome. So if that's the case, then maybe that'll be the first superhero movie that I like. Question 3, what's your favorite food and treat? My favorite food, so I've thought about this a lot. So I am of Italian origin, which you can tell by my blue eyes and blonde hair and pale skin. But I have a very Italian last name. My grandfather is from Sicily. And so food is a big part of my life, particularly Italian food. And I've thought a lot about what my favorite food is because we talk about food so much in my family. And to be perfectly honest with you, my favorite food is olive oil. I think my favorite food is bread in olive oil, like a baguette dipped in olive oil. That's my favorite food and my favorite treat. I'm not a dessert guy. I think that's the one healthy thing that I've done my entire life is I've never really been big into like dessert. I would much rather have like French fries or bread or something as a treat. So I think that bread and olive oil answers both those questions, my favorite food and treat. Very good questions from Pedro. What are some of your favorite stories, be it in games, books, series, anime, etc.? I would say some of my favorite stories are the story in the SpongeBob movie about embracing silliness, embracing like childishness, and that being like a facet of adulthood. I think is a really interesting theme from a great movie. Lord of the Rings is probably my favorite like book series of all time. I think Game of Thrones is the best TV show of all time, despite the horrible last couple seasons. The story in the game Celeste, if you've ever played the indie game Celeste, is probably my favorite video game of all time. That's not a Pokemon game. And that is a story that made me cry that I think is like a beautiful and fantastically written story, in addition to just being an awesome game. Yeah, I think that's a good little list. I'll tell you the worst story of all time is Beowulf. Dalty asks, oh wow, what book are you reading right now, or what's your favorite book you've read? So my favorite book that I've ever read is, I mean, pick one of the Lord of the Rings books. My favorite book that I've ever read is probably, I don't know, honestly, it's probably Fellowship of the Ring. I mean, that's my favorite book I've ever read. My favorite like non-fiction book that I've ever read is a book called Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. What I'm reading right now, I'm reading a young adult series called Scythe, which is insane. I just finished the first book yesterday, actually, or day before yesterday, and I'm gonna read the next one tonight, I'm not gonna read the whole book tonight, but I'm gonna start reading the next one tonight, and it's incredible. Like it's unbelievable. I'm not gonna spoil anything about it. I heavily recommend it. If you trust me, you should read it. It's amazing. Next question is, have you street passed anyone yet? So this is referring to 3DS. Those, like, if you know, you know. I won't spend a bunch of time on this. I haven't. I kind of hope to on occasion, like I'll look and see, but I live in a kind of like small, rural, kind of old person-y area. And so I haven't been anywhere yet where that would be more likely. Haven't seen anybody yet, but I hope to. All right, one of my favorite internet people I've ever met, Maeri, asks, what is your take on physical versus digital photos for keepsake and memory purposes? Perhaps hypocritically, if like best case scenario, ironically, worst case scenario, hypocritically, I'm kind of a big digital media guy. I love, like, I made that video recently about like my old YouTube videos and shit, and like the value, the importance of memories and creating things. I'm very sentimental. I have pictures of stuff. Like I printed pictures from like this is from the Shergos, one of the last, like if you've seen my video about the Shergos, I printed a bunch of pictures. I did a disposable camera and took a bunch of pictures. I have these like all over my studio and all over my house and stuff. So like I like physical media is cool. It's more like tangible. It's more romantic, but I think digital, especially for photos, for like keepsake stuff, I think as long as you're deliberate about making sure that your library persists, that like you don't lose it or delete it, or you get rid of your phone and you lose all those pictures or whatever, I think that's great. And like I think that's awesome. It's a very convenient way of storing things and organizing things and having a library of memories. So I'm all about digital photos. Next question for Maeri, what's your favorite fiction book or series? That would be Lord of the Rings. Perhaps Scythe is on its way. Also Aragon. Next question from Maeri says, what is your favorite, or do you have a favorite non-fiction book or series? I already answered that. And then, that's funny, there's a through line to some of these questions. Who is your favorite superhero? My favorite superhero... My favorite superhero is Ezra Koenig from Vampire Weekend. Sooth asks, at what point in your life did you decide that you wanted to be a teacher for a living? Was there a specific trigger for said decision? Asking as a university student who's considering the possibility of being a teacher in the future. Sooth, I am the biggest ambassador of becoming a teacher that you will ever come across in your life. When I started my career, I was inundated with saggy, angry old teachers who were like,
Why would you become a teacher? You know we don't make any money. You know these damn kids are crazy. You know this is a horrible job. I hate my life. Every day I wake up and I want to die.
Like teachers are the worst ambassadors of being teachers. Teaching is amazing. It is so fun. It is August 2nd recording this. We go back to school in 3 days, and I'm so excited to start the year off. Like, I love my summers off. That's a big reason why I became a teacher, but like teaching is awesome. It's so fun. It's the most fun job I can imagine. Now, I am somebody who, like, if I was offered $30,000 a year to never work again, I wouldn't show up to work on Monday. But out of the jobs that exist, teaching is like the best one. As for how I became a teacher, so in other long story short, do it. Become a teacher. It's fun. You'll love it. The money's not that bad either. Like it's a the retirement and the medical and the insurance benefits are great. The money's not that bad, but you do have to get a master's degree. Otherwise, the money is kind of bad. So I guess. I don't know. I take it back. The money sucks, but I mean, I'm surviving. I'm doing fine. At what point in my life did I decide that? So, I didn't go to school to be a teacher. I started my career. Maybe one day I'll do a video about how I, like, the crazy start to my career. But I didn't go to school to become a teacher. I have a degree in English, and I thought that I wanted to be maybe a lawyer or something because my dad always said that I loved arguing with him, which I realize now was more of just like a parenting thing than it was like an actual like, oh, you're good at arguing. It was more like a I don't know, whatever. So I graduated with a degree in English thinking like, oh, well, maybe I'll go to law school after this. I went to work at this law firm. I was like a paralegal, like legal assistant kind of at this law firm. I won't say the name of it, and it sucked. It was horrible. I hated it. I worked there for like a year and then I was like, these people suck. This is miserable. This is not what I want to do. And I had one of my dad's friend's girlfriend at the time was like the lieutenant superintendent in a nearby county. And she was like, hey, I heard that you expressed interest in wanting to be a teacher. And I was like, nope. And she was like, oh, well, I don't know where I heard that before. And I was like, well, wait. Yeah, I mean, that sounds cool. Maybe that would be fun. I don't know. I never really thought about it. And she was like, well, blah, blah, blah. She like, I don't know where, like it was divine intervention or some shit. Like, I don't know where it came from. But so she helped me get a job at a really rough inner city school that was willing to hire teachers on an emergency certificate because they were in desperate need of teachers. And I started in the middle of the year in January of 2020 with no experience, with no student teaching, with no education as to like how to teach other than like a degree in English. And I was kind of just thrown into it. And then it was really hard. But I think like coming to the profession from like the other side, like not being taught and kind of groomed to be a teacher, I think is part of why I love it so much. Is like I teach in a way that I had to learn to teach while I was teaching. Like, I'm not trying to fit into a keyhole, like I'm not trying to like force the things that I was taught into a package that works for my situation. I just like learned how to do it because of necessity. And I think that that's why I love it so much. But yeah, so that would be kind of where it came from. But yeah, you should be a teacher. It's awesome. Clawy Ban asks, can you meow for us? Meow. Or alternatively, that's what your cat sounds like if you don't. That's why you should fix your cats. They'll do that all night long for a week, every month. If you don't get your cats fixed, they'll go. Well, get your cats fixed. Lenora, who recommended Owl House to me that I was talking about earlier, asks the following questions. What is your favorite movie and why? My favorite movie is, it depends on the day that I get asked, but it's the same few movies that I answer. Two of them, annoyingly, are Wes Anderson films. I know that's a very like cliche and like passe thing. I love Wes Anderson. The color grading is so beautiful. But Moonrise Kingdom and Isle of Dogs are two of my favorite movies, and depending on the day, that will be one that I answer as my favorite. Or another, or there are three other movies that kind of cycle as my favorite movie, and they are a movie called Short Term 12, which starred Brie Larson and is kind of a, wasn't like a huge movie or something. It's very, very good. A movie called Peanut Butter Falcon starring Shia LaBeouf, which is about him and an escaped like mental institution patient with Down syndrome, and they go on like this Mark Twain-y kind of adventure. It's very like heartwarming and beautiful. Or Swiss Army Man, which is a Daniel Radcliffe kind of art film, which is very uncomfortable and strange and beautiful and funny and weird. And I love it. So those would be kind of, I guess that's a top 5, but any of those on whatever day you ask me could be my favorite movie. Lenora also asked, how is progress on the book going? You'll find out in part 3 of this video. By the way, if you watch that part of the video, which I hope that you will because I need help. So I read the 4th and the 5th chapter at the end of this video. If you watch it, the fourth chapter in the book is very lore heavy. And so if that is your critique, like that it's too lore heavy or whatever, that it's too like kind of history booky, unless the criticism is more specific, I think that I'm okay with that, because ultimately this book in a perfect world is the first book in a long series in a universe that establishes like a lot of books and a lot of characters that have their own series and things like that. And so it's very important to me that the entirety of the world is kind of fleshed out, and a big chunk of the history part of that is told through dialogue in this fourth chapter. But I realize that it will probably read a little history booky. I guess what would be really valuable for me is if you can go into it kind of accepting that and knowing that like that's coming. If it is tolerable to you, then I think that's a win for me. Like, you know, I mean, if you're a fan of Lord of the Rings is kind of a chore to read at times. But the depth of like the hard world building style that like Tolkien uses is part of what makes Lord of the Rings so enthralling. Not that my book or series or whatever would ever be on par with Lord of the Rings, but that I'm trying to do a poor imitation of that kind of thing, of fleshing out a big world, and to do so, you know, you kind of do have to take detours. Anyway, speaking of detours, it's going great. I'm like 50 something thousand words in. I'm shooting for like 100 and kind of wrapping it up for the first book. So I'm like halfway there, but it's going great. Next one. Oh, I love this question. Lenora, you are just the best. What is a tip that you have for people who want to take your approach to YouTube? It's like you already watched this video somehow and you made this question. I think a tip for people who want to take my approach to YouTube would be to, if I could sum up anything, just I guess like life-wise, honestly, for me, the way that I try to look at life is do it anyway. That like our world, that the modern world is so oppressive and so scary and so pressure heavy and pressurized that you just have to adopt a mentality of do it anyway, and to trust that there are people in the world who are craving reality. That if anything, you know, the fact that I have any video that has more than 200 views, given the kind of shit that I talk about and how rambly and all over the place I am, is evidence that there are people who want that, who are looking for things that feel real, that feel gritty, that feel not gritty like Shawshank Redemption, but gritty in that they're like messy and real and human. You know, it might not ever be as big, it might not ever be as monetarily profitable or something as like if you're Mr. Beast doing a PlayStation 5 giveaway or some shit, but I got so much out of my videos before anybody was ever watching them, because they were things that were real and they were important to me in a vacuum. And so the like getting over the hump or getting over the fear of putting that out into the world with the potentiality for people to see it is kind of what gave it value for me. That they were very important to me, and they've always meant a lot to me, even when I was a kid making stupid shit, because I made something and making it was what was important, and then putting it out there was a way of stamping it and saying, this is something that I'm proud of, this is something that I made. And if you can kind of have that perspective with the things that you make, that's the only way that anything could ever work anyway. Like, you have to get extremely lucky. It has to be bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's algorithmic garbage that anything gets platformed and other things don't. You have to get extremely lucky, but you can deal with the deflation of it not working or not blowing up or whatever, if the thing that you've made is important to you. If it's not, and it doesn't do well, then it's going to suck. And then at that point, it's why are you doing it in the first place, right? Like if you want to make money on YouTube, look up some guy's video about how to skim Family Guy clips with Subway Surfer in the background and just, do podcast clips over the top of a clip show underneath or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, why make a video in the first place if the goal is for numbers? So that would be my advice, is just do it anyway. Be yourself. Always smile. Next few questions are from Rias, one of the nicest people I have ever met on the internet. Just seems to be an awesome guy. Number 1, do you have any particular achievements or impacts you're pleased with that have come about as a result of your channel? Absolutely. The main one being that I had a video that was about the Shergos, which is an event that I do with my friends every year, which is a video game tournament. And it brings my friends from all over the country now, as we've kind of become adults, to my house for 3 days every year. And it means the world to me. And I kind of made a video using that as the plot device for about refusing to grow up, about like maintaining youth, like youthfulness or whatever. And that video I think has like 25,000 views, that was like the first moment in the channel where I was like, oh, that's what works. Like that's what really matters, is that I'm making a like concise or compelling like case for something, or that I'm like talking about something that resonates with people through a personal lens that feels vulnerable, that feels real, that feels meaningful. So that would be the biggest one, is that video did as well as it did. Same thing with the video that I just posted a few weeks ago about all of my old YouTube videos. That those videos resonated with people and meant something to people. Those would be kind of my big two. Some other little accomplishments or things that have meant a lot to me, achievements, is I've gotten a lot of comments and emails from people. I won't like out anybody, but that were, that like credited me with heavy stuff, and it's very hard to like accept or like to internalize that like I could have made an impact on somebody in that way. But it's like, it's very I don't know, hopefully you know what I'm trying to say, because I don't really know how to say it, but that means a lot to me when there are people who are like, this, I don't know. I'm gonna cry if I think you get the point of what I'm trying to say. That stuff means a lot to me. Question 2 from Rias is: are you still enjoying your toned down and more careful relationship with the technology and social media and such? Where do you feel you are on a scale of it's a struggle, but I feel it's important to do, versus I do it because I enjoy it? This is a great question. You were just the most thoughtful, like kind person I think that has ever typed anything on the internet. I'm doing very well, I think, overall, and I am happy, and my life is much better. And so my only goal is to become further radicalized, if anything. I have no regrets about anything that I've given up. I don't struggle with any, like a drive to relapse with anything that I've given up. The only thing that I do struggle with is YouTube, and that's kind of why I made that video recently. All of my videos are as much advice for me as they are for anybody else. I get looped into YouTube. I get sucked into scrolling forever on the homepage, and I'm trying to kind of break that habit. But I mean, I'm ultimately happy with how things are going. If things stayed the way that they are, I don't feel like I'm wasting a bunch of time in my day. I feel like I'm more productive and more prolific with the things that I'm trying to do creatively. So everything is going well in that regard. I'm struggling to figure out, especially with as many like comments and stuff that I get that I want to interact with and respond to and read and stuff. I'm still working on finding the balance there, and that's kind of the last hurdle. Other than that, I think I'm doing pretty good. Number 3 from Rias is: what's your favorite archetypal character class or role in stories and RPGs and the like? Does that differ from the one you'd pick for yourself? By far, unequivocally, without hesitation, without thought at all, the support mage kind of character, whatever that looks like in whatever universe it is that it's existing in, is like I gravitate toward immediately. Like the kind of performative, like vaguely queer wizard in a dress is like, that's the one that I resonate with the most always, and immediately, viscerally. Yeah. And then does that differ from the one I'd pick for myself? No, that would be who I would be in real life if I could. To what extent do you discuss screen time with your students? Have you found any strategies that work with middle schoolers, any that have totally failed? This is a very fun question to end on, because I have been running an experiment on my students ever since I started teaching, which I call the Harvey experiment. And what I do is I do an entire 2-day lesson on social media. And it's not, don't tell the county, it's not on the curriculum. I'm not supposed to be, I mean, I'm not doing anything inappropriate or anything, but it's not like a lesson I have to teach or anything. And I just do a lesson on all the things that I kind of talk about on this channel in like a master class kind of quick version. And I talk about, I point to studies about how it's the ways that it hijacks your brain chemistry, and I do my whole spiel. And I talk about how dangerous it is, particularly for kids the age of the students that I teach, which are 7th graders. They're 12, 13 years old. Then, without any connection or any clue as to what I'm doing or why I'm doing what I'm doing, the next 2 days of class, I make my students watch a movie that is called Harvey, which is another of my favorite movies, to Lenora's question. A movie called Harvey. It came out in like 1950 something. It stars Jimmy Stewart. And it is about a man who sees a giant white rabbit. He's the only one that can see it, and it is a very slow burning kind of movie that's very entertaining, very funny, and very fun to watch. But it is, it's from the 1950s. It's in black and white. The sound isn't great. It's hard to understand unless you're paying close attention. I just play it for my students. I'm like, all right, class, today we're going to watch this movie. This is a movie that is very important to me. We're not going to do anything on this movie. We're just going to kind of take 2 days off, and we're going to watch this movie. I just want to kind of know what you guys think of it. And I sit and watch them watch the movie, and I like observe how they interact with it, and I just kind of take notes. And so I have kept a spreadsheet of how each of my classes every year responds to this movie through the context of like, what is their attention span? What is their capacity to engage with something like that they're unfamiliar with, that is kind of boring, that doesn't look like anything that they've ever watched before, that is dialogue and plot driven, and is ultimately like visually kind of unexciting. I've kept data on that, and I also have kept track of their average screen time, which is growing and worrying. But I'm optimistic about my kids because I'm year after year, I'm amazed by their depth and creativity, and how interesting they are, and the profound things that they say, and how thoughtful they can be. But I am also simultaneously worried, as I have data about their screen time and how high it is, how much time they spend on their phones every day when they're in school. Like, you're asleep for like 6 hours a day at minimum. I know they stay up late. And then you're at school, not on your phone, for 7 hours a day. And some of them have 9 hours of screen time. I'm like, that's every hour that you're awake. Like, that's crazy. But I have found that it has made a difference, I think, in some of them. Like, you're not gonna, it feels a little preachy, it feels a little old man-y, and I try to package it in a way that doesn't come off that way for them. But it's kind of inevitable that it feels that way, and so I lose some of them in doing it. But I've seen it click for some of them, and I think that it has made a difference in some of the kids, and they respond well to it overall. If nothing else, if I can plant the seed that when they develop a dissociative disorder in their late 20s and they think back to, oh God, what am I going to do? That they're at least able to they were like, oh yeah, my 7th grade teacher was so annoying. What was he talking about? Oh yeah. And if that's best case scenario, then I'm okay with that too. So, all right, moving on to part 3. Thank you guys so much for some awesome questions. That was so fun. Like, I wish that I could just do that forever. That's so much more fun than sitting in a dark room in silence and writing for 6 hours. But obviously the world needs my opinion on Emperor's New Groove, so I could never starve everyone of that. On to part 3. So if you have watched the first of these videos, you will know that I am writing a novel, and you will have heard and read the first 3 chapters. I'm going to read the next 2 chapters now. I got so much incredible feedback from the first video. Thank you guys so much, genuinely. And I spent hours going back and revising the first few chapters based on a lot of that feedback, but I don't want to read all 3 again. And ultimately the story hasn't changed, just some of the pacing and a few of plot choices that ultimately won't come to fruition until later in the book anyway. So I'm just going to quickly summarize and then pick up with chapter 4. Again, please leave me feedback in the comments as brutal and honest as you can be, as long as it's constructive and not just like, boo, you suck, write a different book. I'm going to keep the summary to 30 seconds and skip a ton of detail. So if you want to pause here and go watch the first video, if you're interested, please do. Link in the description. All right, here we go. So Marin wakes up confused to find that he is about to be killed by an orc. He's in this room with this weird cat-like creature, and just before he's about to get demolished, he seems to sort of pop away and then wake up in the room he's been staying in, a back room of a tavern in a nearby town. And he's joined by that cat-like creature who he now realizes saved him and with whom he can communicate telepathically. Marin has grown up on his own in rough and tumble circumstances. He does not trust this creature, and he's on edge as this creature goes on to explain telepathically that Marin is what is known as a Cadmasar, a group of powerful leaders that founded a bygone utopian society that's been replaced by this evil empire led by a king, Thronmir. Marin doesn't believe him, but through various means, the creature convinces him that this is true, that they are in great danger, and essentially, Marin is the last chance to overthrow the empire, the result of a centuries-long plan set in place by this creature, an ancient and powerful unnamed being of a species named Jertooth, who Marin ends up sort of accidentally naming Order. The two travel to a nearby village and stay in the Glorian Inn, wherein Order begins to explain in much more detail kind of what's going on, where they stand, answering Marin's sort of preliminary questions and such. And this is where the story picks up in chapter 4. Marin and Order are in the room at the Glorian Inn. They're discussing the gravity of the situation. It's like a lore dump chapter, so strap in. Chapter 4, Cadmasar. Order and I sat up in our room at the Glorian Inn and talked silently for hours. He told me about the Age of Elm, what it was like, what true peace and prosperity looked like. He told me a story of harmony that seemed almost laughable, and if it had not been for this stern seriousness with which he told the tale, and had I not known what I now knew, I would have probably thought it a joke myself. Order told me how the Empire came to be, the destruction of the Afraran capital, city of no name, as the nature of the cause of Afraran rendered its capital, nameless. Such was indicative of the Council's doctrine that power be decentralized as best as possible and status be irrelevant, and its replacement with the foul-smelling industrial hellhole that was Durfrak. He told me how the council functioned. The Age of Elm was ruled by an augmented democracy of sorts, wherein the painstakingly defined districts of Afraran governed themselves via smaller democracies of their own, paying not equal but equitable taxes based on production and value regarding Afraran at large to the council, which then handled disputes among districts and saved all of the rest for emergencies, or throns. Throns were defined by the districts themselves, and they ranged from outside attacks, of which there were few because Afraran was so expansive, to weather events and subsequent rebuilds, to drought management, and everything in between. Districts would petition the council for involvement in event of a throns, and almost invariably, the council in the city of no name would act to protect the welfare of the district. As the Age of Elm continued, the council built a great stockpile of those excess tax payments as disputes among districts grew less and less common, and throns eventually were limited almost solely to rebuilds and repairs due to weather events. Each district's representative served in an equal position on the council in the city of no name. All districts were respected for their participation in the cause of Afraran and treated with equal preference in terms of their needs and response to their district's throns. The entire system hinged upon three things: mutual respect between districts, the common goal of the cause of Afraran, and the Cadmasar, the details of which Order saved, of course, for last. Each district was subdivided into smaller districts called Goplaisha, who had a limited government of themselves, and essentially, so long as the tax payments were made, all were left to their own devices. When tax payments were not made, which was extremely rare, the council's representative for the district could petition the council for monetary assistance if the payment were not made due to extrinsic forces like drought or flood, or the district could forego payment in lieu of providing young men, or whatever species really, for military service. In the beginning years of the Age of Elm, military service was essential, as previous localized chieftains and the like were struggling for power, so districts often forewent tax payment in exchange for military service. Sometimes this was due to financial necessity, but often it was because the cause of Afraran, the peace, the security, was nearly universally supported, and for the good of the cause, nearly anyone claiming to be of an Afraran people would fight on the nation's behalf. The Age of Elm and its peace and prosperity existed for centuries, though, and as one generation gave way to another, the people of Afraran grew complacent as they forgot the struggles of their ancestors. Afraran flourished, tax payments came on time, support for the cause only grew, and Afraran experienced an age of prosperity in terms of education, art, wealth, and technological advancement that had never been seen before and hasn't since. Since prosperity was essentially universal, there was no opposition for centuries, and the people of Afraran grew to view their way of life as the only possibility. After all, it was paradise. The problem, Order explained, with Afraran and what caused the Age of Elm to meet its end was that the cause of Afraran was only cyclically possible. In other words, governance in such a manner required people to believe in both its validity and viability, and if faith waned, it would crumble from within. Arguments between districts would arise, and Afraran would begin to resemble a normal kingship, only with a council instead of a king. Further, those who represented districts had to be uncorrupted in order for the system to function, so their power had to be restrained. Their power could only be restrained by other council members, which necessitated the power structure itself. Finally, it hinged upon benevolence. Benevolence of council members, benevolence within the Goplaisha, benevolence of the common inhabitants. Wealth was not distributed evenly, and greed could exist within the system without destroying it, but personal greed could not outweigh the good of the Goplaisha, the good of the district, the good of Afraran. Hypothetically, one district acting in its own self-interest above the unified Afraran would require it to be snuffed out or else left to fester. That district would then have to either be allowed to conquer others within Afraran, which defeated the peace aspect of the cause, or it would have to be destroyed by the Afraran military, which defeated the peace aspect of the cause. Either option undermined the entire purpose of the system, and neither could be chosen while perpetuating the cause and fostering belief in its viability, which the system required. Therefore, more simply put, all parties had to be moving in the same direction for the system to continue, and it did for several centuries. But there were two pieces of the story that Order left for the end. The Cadmasar were as close to a king or ruler as Afraran had, Order said. In the beginning, there were 5. Colkay of Dominion, Braidir of Ferton, Bengambian of the Tall North, Rain of Sandal, and Natursme of the Mont. Each of the original 5 Cadmasar were chosen to represent each of the furthest ends of the known world. Colkay from the east, Braidir from the west, Bengambian obviously of the continental north, Rain of the known isles beyond the northern seafront, and Natursme of the southern plains. Each of the original 5 was granted a great power by the last of the Jortooth elders, whom had known of the time before. My direct ancestor, known only as He of Before, sacrificed himself in transferring not only his power, but also his ancient knowledge to the original 5. Each of the original 5 was given and trained in a gift. Colkay was given the gift of Tranfey, Braidir the gift of Thesmerda, Bengambian the gift of Mutans, Rain the gift of Reolesh, or control, the power to wield items only with one's mind, and Natursme, the most powerful gift, the gift of Animaeus, or essentially mind control, though this is a simplification. He of Before was the eldest Jortooth, having lived centuries, and he was the first and to this day the only to discover a method by which to give away his gifts. In his sacrifice, he also used the last bit of his power and essence to bestow upon the original 5 the extended lifespan of the Jortooth, which allowed them to live for several hundreds of years. They were not immortal, but they would live long enough to oversee the formational years of Apharaon. At this point, I hadn't spoken in maybe an hour. I was hypnotized by Order's story, and I was humbled and overjoyed to learn what the common only dreamt of reading in books held in Dofrak. Then again, I supposed I was no longer common, or rather, I never truly was. So Order, I said, finally interrupting Order's tale for the first time, why did you tell me earlier of Tranfey, Thesmerda, Mutans, but not the other 2 given to the original 5 Cadmasar? Well, that is a good question, my friend, replied Order. Generally, Jortooth are unable to control all 5 gifts. Thus, as a rite of passage upon one's maturation, he or she is given the choice of 3 in which to train. The 3 I explained to you are my 3. He of Before was the youngest of a generation before mine, which was more powerful. They could master all 5. And upon sacrificing himself to give his to the Cadmasar, he was the last to ever do this. I thought for a moment. So the Cadmasar were human? The story was always told that they were of a different species. Well, it's less interesting if they're human. Also, most common folk no longer actually believe in the Cadmasar in the first place. The story's long been bastardized. Order replied, well, why didn't He of Before give the gifts to a single man? Why spread them between 5 men? That surely made the task much more demanding, I said. Well, it certainly did, Order replied, but He of Before knew that only Jortooth could wield all of such power without corruption. Man is fallible in this way for all her goodness. He of Before knew the best chance for Apharaon was to provide a power necessary, but to split it amongst 5 parties that would hopefully balance each other. Why didn't He of Before unify Apharaon himself? I asked bluntly. Order laughed. Well, I've pondered the same question myself for many years. My working theory is simply to admit that I'm unsure, and to believe that if he could have, then he would have. I also think that his cause of Apharaon necessitated a split rule. Further, He of Before was also an advanced age and worn from centuries of travel and hard life. He knew his time was limited anyway, and he could not have done it himself. Finally, I believe that their bearing witness to his sacrifice invigorated the original 5 Cadmasar in trust and benevolence against man's nature of warfare and power struggle, and He of Before knew that as man inevitably grew to majority in Apharaon, the common would need relatable figures in whom to place their trust if the cause were to take hold. So, what happened to him, the original 5? I asked. I found that the more I learned from Order, the more I understood there was so much I did not know. Well, this is the last part of the story, which I omitted until now. We are nearing the end of my tale, Marin, and soon we'll begin our journey, he replied in a foreboding tone, not fearful, but certainly not excited. The original 5 Cadmasar were tasked with unifying the known world. This was the direct charge of the last Jortooth elder. They were trained with regard to their gifts by Jortooth masters, studied in the college in the Tall North, which was at the time the most preeminent school in the known world, trained in combat by orc warriors and in magic by elven elders. They were guided by the foremost traveling merchant, Bako of Nowhere, whose own tales could entertain thousands, to all corners of what was to become Apharaon. So each of the original 5 knew firsthand their future dominion and its people. And along the way, they stayed for a season in each of the major districts, which then were not so deliberately defined, but loosely so by weather differences and generally observed by prior tribal borders, working in farms or cities or on community projects, gaining trust and respect and favor across what would become Apharaon. They worked to build the city of No Name themselves with the help of the great architects of Bredirs, Ferton, and only volunteers, apart from themselves, leading by action and exemplification of their participatory governance. Word began to spread across what would become Apharaon of the great city, being built by the 5 virtuous, powerful men whom had spent months in the years prior laboring in all of the eventual major districts, and volunteers began to multiply for aiding in building the city of No Name. As they worked, the original 5 taught the volunteers of He of Before's cause of Apharaon. Eventually, many thousands worked voluntarily to build the city, which they all began to feel belonged in part to them. And the original 5 gleefully taught them that it did. The city belonged to all of Apharaon. The volunteers began to refer to their hometowns and cities as part of Apharaon, and the volunteers became inhabitants. The inhabitants became Apharaon peoples, united by their common goal. And the city went up within 4 years. Upon its completion, the original 5 asked for volunteers from all the cities and towns of the known world, and of which there were now in the city, to go home, to tell their townsfolk of the cause of Apharaon, to choose a representative of their town or city via vote or volunteer or lottery, whichever they preferred, and bid they themselves, the chosen representatives, and any who wished to live in the greatest city in the known world, to return to the city of No Name, where they would be welcome home as Apharaon peoples. Order paused, and I could not tell if he did so to gather his thoughts or if for some other reason, but I took the opportunity to ask one of the hundreds of questions floating through my mind. I could see the city in my mind's eye, sprawling with tall, modern structures of stone and marble. Open public amenities would populate the city streets: libraries, bathhouses, schools, trading posts, amphitheaters. Thousands of marble stairs would lead up to a massive building with a great hall where the council would meet around a circular table big enough for hundreds of seats, with 5 ornate, specially designed chairs spread evenly amongst the hundreds in the pattern of the points of a star, wherein the 5 original Cadmasar would sit during council meetings. The city was beautiful, sleek, modern, huge, but somehow comfortable and cozy. How many returned after the original 5's initial call? I asked. Over 400,000, Marin, including 2,000 designated as representatives from their respective towns and cities, Order responded with wonder in his silent voice. Writings regarding the migrations liken the sight to the rising of the sun over the horizon, or to the sight of the ocean for the first time. 400,000. That dwarfs Dufrak, I said. But what did the Cadmasar do with the 2,000 representatives? Surely there could not have remained so many separate towns and cities. A shrewd observation, Marin, and that gives me hope. The original 5 were wise in handling this. They organized the representatives according to their town's proximity to one another, adjusting for approximate population and climate differences, proposing that each group of cities and towns dissolve into one district. Naturally, many opposed this and wanted their own say in the governance of Apharaon, but the Cadmasar used that desire in their favor. All of the original representatives would serve on councils that governed their created districts, and each smaller council would appoint or elect a representative from outside the Goplaitius Council to serve on the larger council in the city of No Name. That higher council member would represent the needs and desires of his or her district, which would be comprised of representatives of every city and town within. It was a complicated system, but one that gave everyone desiring one a voice to be heard. And this appealed to both the vain and the pure. The vain received their status symbol and a bit of power. The pure received recognition of their city's thrones, and all gained the protection of Apharaon, whose new districts and governing councils served each other. And all served the cause of Apharaon. Districts had not the power to rule over their inhabitants, only to represent their needs and wants, and to petition the council to aid in their pursuits. The laws of Apharaon were categorical and universal, simple in their doling of punishment, and only related to absolute necessity: immediate exile for murder or crimes of abuse, and sentences of varying lengths of supervised construction and maintenance within the city of No Name for all personal crimes: theft, assault, destruction of property, etc. All crimes could be verified without the need for trial or judge through the use of notorismes animeus, so none were mistakenly convicted and none were punished unfairly due to personal biases, because all crimes were handled by the Cadmasar themselves. Further, Crimes became increasingly rare as life became prosperous for all, and all were of Apharaon voluntarily and because they believed in the cause of Apharaon. This system, of course, would still not be invincible to corruption in the same way that rule under a single king or emperor was not, if not for the Cadmasar, who were benevolent. Order stopped, and I was confused because the tale he told seemed perfect and sustainable so long as the Cadmasar existed. I knew little of the Cadmasar, but I knew that they could transfer their powers that I now knew were the Jertooth's gifts to others upon their death, so I didn't see a reason why the system could not continue in perpetuity. Order, you stop without telling me how Apharaon fell, I said. Well, it fell from within the original 5, he replied, with a great sadness. What do you mean? I asked. Order sighed. "NetorzMay," he said simply. There was, for the first time, a deep hatred, a heaviness in the way that he spoke. I already had an idea of what Order would tell me next, though the details I could have never expected. NetorzMay was easily the most beloved of the original 5 by the common of Apharaon. He handled many personal disputes due to his gift of animeus and the resulting ability to see into one's memories and desires. From all across Apharaon would come hundreds monthly to speak with NetorzMay, who developed a godlike mythos for his unending aid in the affairs of the common, and over many years his reputation began to distort his view of himself and of the cause. NetorzMay began to see himself, as many of the common did, a god, a divine being, capable of things that no one else was. And while the latter was true of all the Cadmasar, NetorzMay's gifts applications gave him a unique capability to endear himself to the common, and they preferred him to the other 5. He grew to adore the attention and praise, so much so that he would leave the city of No Name on what were essentially traveling circus tours, making a mockery of his gift by performing for common of Apharaon as a sort of deity, doing magic, using animeus as a tool for hire. It grew in severity to a point at which many would pay him to control the minds of their opponents in civil disputes or give him tithing in thanks for having done so in prior tours. Naturally, the other 4 of the original 5 grew angry with NetorzMay, who in their view was abandoning his duties as Cadmasar and with regard to council matters, and they arranged to have a private meeting with him. On this day, Kolke led an intervention of sorts, wherein all of the other 4 pleaded with NetorzMay to again devote himself to the cause, and not his personal fame and status. But NetorzMay's ego had grown too strong, and he considered the meeting a jealous attack. The meeting backfired, and NetorzMay stormed out of the Great Hall and out of the city of No Name altogether, cursing the rest of the original 5 for betraying him, exiling himself, and claiming that Apharaon would crumble without him. I began to get an idea of how the story would end. I listened as Order's words became heavy with sadness and fury. He returned, didn't he? I asked, almost knowing the answer. That he did. Order replied. For years, the remaining 4 Cadmasar did not hear of or from NetorzMay, whom they would later discover was observing carefully the goings-on of Apharaon with the help of spies who defaulted to his side, as well as practitioners of magic who too had sympathized with the beloved NetorzMay, who told them the other 4 Cadmasar had turned on him and were out to destroy Apharaon. NetorzMay was furious to hear repeatedly that Apharaon continued to function healthily without him, which multiplied his rage and hatred for the others. And in his self-exile, he began to secretly raise a militia, using his reputation as well as his gift of animeus to both recruit and conscript both common infantry and more powerful men and creatures from across Apharaon. He eventually found himself the general of a defecting army, and 4 years after his departure, he rode on the city of No Name under a banner of his own, the Empire. Order paused, and both of us felt the weight of the history. We just sat still for a moment, myself almost afraid to speak for some reason, and Order presumably mentally preparing himself for the details of the fall of Apharaon. After a deep sigh, he continued. The Empire Army, so named due to NetorzMay's ego, as he wanted the simplest name for his desired nation in order to keep all of the focus on himself and his name, arrived on the eastern Apharaon border in what has now become heralding, actually, to find absolutely no opposition. As I mentioned priorly in passing, the prosperity and prolonged peace within Apharaon had allowed them to grow ignorant and soft. The Empire Army advanced toward the city of No Name for weeks unopposed before word could even reach the council, and along their way the army burned and destroyed as much of their path as they could, slaying thousands, burning books, salting fields, stealing and robbing. NetorzMay also conscripted many practitioners of magic with whom he'd trained in his 4 years of exile, and he himself was now more powerful than ever. using Animeus as well as magic and obvious intimidation to increase his following as they marched on. When word did finally reach the council, they acted as quickly as they could, securing the borders of the city, scrambling to revive the Apheraean military, which had become a shell of its former self, but ultimately they were too late and too weak. Natursme and his army reached the capital, easily overpowering the small and unpracticed Apheraean military. He bade his army tear down the city piece by piece as he strode alone up the many steps to the Great Hall to confront the council and the remaining 4 of the original 5. When he arrived inside, he saw that the members of the council had abandoned the Cadmasar in fear, and he laughed to see them alone at the table that normally sat over 300. The other 4 fought valiantly with sword and magic alike, but their training had been forgotten over hundreds of years of peace and distraction with bureaucracy. Their expertise in magic was only that of restoration and conjuration, while Natursme had trained with exiled practitioners for some years now in magic of destruction, and 2, he wielded the most powerful gift of Animeus. Even the 4 Cadmasar were no match for Natursme, and all 4 were slain. And in the audacity of his mania, he then called upon one of his Empire practitioners to melt the 5 chairs of the Cadmasar around the table and amalgamate them into one wicked throne upon which he sat, and declared himself Thranmere of the Empire. Thranmere from Throns, which you now know meant problem or emergency. In the years following, he and his villains recolonized Apheraean, turning the rubble of the destroyed cities into hastily founded townships, and he ruled by force. Apheraean became the empire in which we now live, and while most know Thranmere to be evil, none have been able to rebel against him for his power of Animeus and his massive, blind army that only grows as the years wear on. I was astonished. Thranmere was not just an evil king, he was Cadmasar, and more, he was one of the original 5. I didn't know what to say. Order allowed me time to digest what I'd been told, and the both of us sat in dark silence for the rest of the night. I was unable to sleep despite the bed being the most comfortable on which I had lain in many months, and I played over and over in my mind's eye the last stand of the 4 remaining Cadmasar, slain by their own brother in bitter betrayal. It haunted me, and I knew now why Order told me the story in such detail. He needed me to see it, to feel the devastation he knew so well, and ultimately, he needed me to know who I really was. Chapter 5, The Road to Tyria. The next morning, I was awakened from a sleep into which I had fallen probably only 2 hours prior by a heavy knock at our room's door. I rose to open it and saw the innkeeper with the same friendly smile on his face. "Good morning," he said. "Or I suppose I should say good afternoon." I rubbed my eyes. "Afternoon?" I asked. "Yes, sir. The sun is firmly in the sky. I'd wager it's nearly 2 o'clock. He said cheerily. "Normally I'd have gotten you up much earlier, but the amount of gold you tipped the inn last night warranted a good few extra hours." "Well, thank you, sir. We'll be out shortly," I said politely. "I do admire your use of we there, Maeri. You must sure love that cat of yours." I smiled at the innkeeper and then at Order. "I sure do. He's a good old boy," I said. The innkeeper left, I gathered my things, and I turned to Order. Thesmerda was so convenient. I had not been able to freely use Apheraean in conversation in quite some time. I'd grown to thoroughly enjoy speaking mentally. I must say I preferred this mode of conversation between Order and myself to speaking aloud at all by this point. "Order, whatever we must do to overthrow Thranmere and reunify Apheraean, I'm willing to try. I don't feel capable, but I trust you. And if you say it is I who can and so must take this responsibility, I will follow your lead, my friend," I said. I felt like I was pledging allegiance to a king, but here I was in the room of a cheap inn, speaking in silence to a creature most thought did not exist. The last several days had been a whirlwind, and I wondered if at any moment I was going to wake up from a dream I would find I'd been having this whole time. Order rose from his curled position on the floor and stretched. "You need not be so reverent, Marin. You are the last Cadmasar. If anything, you are my superior. I think we ought to view each other foremost as friends. And secondly, we can view ourselves as Apheraean. You'll find you're quite powerful and capable. I am but an old, desperate creature whose final great adventure is the one upon which we now embark." I realized in this moment that in a normal interaction, the two of us would likely now shake hands, a gesture of friendship, mutual trust, mutual respect. Of course, this was impossible, but I felt a gesture of some kind was in order. "Men would now shake hands," I said, and extended my arm sarcastically. Order smiled and swished his long tail around to meet my outstretched hand with a little pop sound. "A fitting symbol," I said with a smile. "To Marin in Order." he said. To Maeri and Order, I replied. So, what do we do? Order sort of bounced in excitement. He may have been older than I would ever be, but he retained an infectious, youthful spirit and often reacted to things in this way, jumping, bouncing. He was altogether quite an entertainer in this way. Well, I've planned for that question for many years, he said. First, we must travel to see an old friend of mine. She will help guide you in discovering and sharpening your gifts. Thesmerida is obviously one which you possess, but I am of the belief that you possess more than one. Along the way, I will explain what leads me to believe such, but we must go now, for I fear that the Empire may be on our trail by now. We exited the Glorian Inn after buying some food and drink to take with us, thanked the old innkeeper for his generosity, and began down the road that led out of the small village. As we walked, I noticed that Order had several patches on his hind legs that were bare and scarred, where fur seemed to have been before but had not grown back. What happened there on your legs? I asked. Order chuckled. I've been through many trials on my journey to you, Marin, he said. The scars to which you refer came from an escape attempt when I was traveling outside of Afarayan. The benefit of mutants can also be its own burden, as I'm seen by the common as a common creature, in this case a fox, by those who witness me. A tribe of small, man-like creatures, maybe a Touchthon on the northern coast outside the borders of old Afarayan, captured me for my perceived pelt. I could not use Tranfei under their supervision lest I arouse suspicion, so I had to escape as a common creature would. Many things of this sort have happened to me in my years, Marin, and I've learned to let way lead on to way. I was inspired by Order. He'd ostensibly been planning and working for centuries, traveling thousands of miles to set in motion plots that would not come to fruition for many years. I admired his dedication to his cause, and the cause. We may need a means of more effective travel, my friend, said Order after a few minutes of walking. I myself can walk forever, but I know man tires easily. Do you ride horseback? I have yet to get the opportunity. My adolescence has been a rough one, I replied. Besides, I prefer my feet, stealthier that way. Very well, Order said, but you must learn in time. It will become necessary. We walked, Order bounding pleasantly by my side, and I myself with a renewed vigor and optimism I'd not experienced in some time. It felt good to have purpose, and it felt better to know that I was somebody. I'd read my mother's letter many times and was always bitter to read her claims that I was special. My life up until now was certainly not special. I finally felt like she wouldn't have been disappointed in me, and that was a relieving and freeing feeling. After a few hours, we'd traveled further from areas I knew than I'd ever gone. The infrastructure, as cobbled and dilapidated as the cities of the Empire were, of the more densely populated areas now began to feel like a collection of impressive accomplishments relative to the sparse, grassy woods through which we now traveled. There were occasional huts with small personal farms, humble stables obviously built by hand, and a rare tavern or two that we passed, but most of this area seemed to be just a largely uninhabited forest, split down the middle by the well-traveled, foot-leveled path on which we walked. The ground beneath our feet grew soggy as we entered what I knew to essentially be the natural border wall of marshland that blocked the northeastern edge of the Empire's domain from one of the last few unaffiliated nearby territories. The marshland was not impassable, but it was a hassle to travel. This, accompanied by the fact that Gilmea, the small community on the outside, was not known to be much more than a tiny, poor collection of quiet, subsistent farmers at best, was enough to dissuade the Empire from even bothering to conquer them. A small number from the Empire would defect to Gilmea on occasion, usually never to be heard from again, but their population remained insignificant enough for Thronmere and the Empire to leave them be. Is your friend in Gilmea? I asked, as I waded through knee-deep swamp water. Order jumped gracefully from one root at the base of a giant cypress tree to another. I envied this ability. She is, at least according to what I last heard. Order responded from the base of a tree about 20 feet ahead of me. Thesmerida seemed to have a range of up to 100 feet. Order and I had been testing the limits of the ability as we trudged through the marshland. Her name is Minerva. When she and I last saw each other, we were working quietly together in the capital. Minerva is a historian of sorts and a fine practitioner of magic. She was aiding me in deciding the plausibility of your existence. Well, I certainly seem to exist, I said sarcastically. We knew that, Marin. I just mean the plausibility that you could actually be Cadmasar, Order replied. Well, why didn't you just come see for yourself? That is how you confirm this to be true anyway, is it not? Wouldn't it have saved much time and effort? Order stopped before jumping to the next route and waited for me to catch up with him. That was the method of my final confirmation, as I had to be completely sure, but I think you underestimate the endeavor that was my journey to you. I made myself an enemy of the highest caliber to Thronmere himself by arranging our adventure, Marin. To double-cross the king of the Empire is for anyone but us certain death. And not only that, but I had to traverse the entire domain of the Empire on foot, for obviously I cannot ride horseback myself, and it was far too risky to use Trenfei. Rumors of a last Jertooth, similar to rumors of a new Cadmasar, have existed for some time. Thronmere privately knew of my existence through our secret foe alliance, but publicly he feigned having no such knowledge. And if anyone were to discover my true identity, I would be persecuted and pursued greatly. I knew that this was Apharaon's one chance, and I knew what was at stake. If it was time for me to commence this undertaking, I wanted to be as certain as was possible, Order said. I understand, but what could Minerva have done to help you confirm the rumors from Defrak? That's quite a distance to travel back and forth in secrecy, I said. I tell you again that Minerva is a fine practitioner of magic. By this time, it was beginning to get dark in the marshland, but as neither Order nor myself wanted to spend the evening here, we decided to continue on in the dark. Order assured me that the edge of Gilmea was no longer than a few hours out, and so on we went. I thought this was a much easier resolution for him than it was me, given that he was not soaking wet from head to toe, soldiering through mud and stagnant water up to his waist. But I agreed that I would rather forge onward a bit longer than attempt to sleep here. The marshland was quite beautiful if one were not standing in its waters. The giant cypress trees created an almost enclosed canopy that bustled with the activity of birds and the famously adorable skia of the area, jumping from branch to branch. I particularly enjoyed watching the skia interact with each other. They're mammals, but similar to bats, they have fleshy wings that allow them to catch wind drifts and breezes, which they do with great skill, waiting patiently on a branch before suddenly jumping into the air and sort of floating off into the distance. Skia cannot fly, but they use their wings to glide downwind. I'd always been fond of them. Soon we were able to see a clearing in what seemed to be the edge of the marshland. I was tired, foul from spending hours in the smelly, stagnant waters, and ready to be elsewhere. It seemed that only several minutes remained before my wish would come true. As we neared the clearing, I heard a rustling in the leaves of a low branch above me. Order and I stopped, and I instinctively placed my hand on my dagger, which swung from my hip. There was a low, gurgling sound coming from behind the leaves. It sounded unlike anything we had heard that day, and it was disconcerting. "Quiet," Order said, and we waited. We were lucky to have been unbothered throughout our travels through the marshland, as we both knew that there were dangerous creatures within. "What do you think it is?" I asked, thankful once again for the wonder of Thesmerda. "I'm unsure. In all my years, I've not heard such a sound." This was not the encouraging reply for which I'd hoped, and I gripped my dagger tightly. "I suppose we should continue forward under the branch, but do your best to remain silent," he said. Order gracefully bounded to a root on the other side of the branch before us and anxiously awaited for me to traverse underneath it. The gurgling sound continued, but it seemed to grow quiet and more strained. Cautiously, I moved one foot before the other through knee-deep water as slowly as possible so as not to make noise. Nothing. The other, nothing. Again, nothing. I was directly under the branch. The gurgling noise stopped. I could not help myself, and I looked up in morbid curiosity. I guessed that if this was the moment I was going to die, I wanted at least the satisfaction of knowing what it was that attacked me. And as soon as I turned my eyes skyward, I realized what the gurgling sound was. I realized this because, as I looked up, a small ball of fur fell from the branch and smacked me in my face. In a blur, I heard a high-pitched popping sound as the fur ball bounced off my face, back up into the air, and then landed again on the top of my head. It was a skia. The sound was the creature choking on a berry. The gurgling stopped because the poor thing had fainted from asphyxia. It had fallen at the exact time I'd reached the branch upon which it stood. The impact of hitting me in the face had jarred the berry loose, and now the small animal had grasped onto my hair with its claws and was firmly attached to my head. Involuntarily, I jumped and screamed in surprise as this happened, but the skia is a tree-dwelling creature, and its claws are adapted perfectly to maintaining its balance on moving twigs and branches. It did not budge. After I calmed down, I grabbed the little thing myself and had to pry it from my head with great force. I plucked the skia and tossed it forward. The skia unfurled its little wings and glided gracefully to a nearby branch. Order was delighted by this ridiculous situation, and he laughed heartily ahead of me. "You would have done the same," I said, embarrassed. "But alas, it was you." he retorted. I scratched my sore scalp, which now featured 2 small bald patches where the ski had been attached so desperately. We turned and began to walk forward when there came a thud against my satchel. I looked down to see the same little creature looking up to me with its oversized eyes perched upon my bag with one leg and the other extending to me a small tuft of my hair. It was as if the skier was saying, "Sorry about that, here's your hair back for your troubles." I looked at the small animal in disbelief. He looked at me, waiting patiently, holding out my hair and his little clawed foot. I slowly reached down and held my hand under his. He flipped his foot, dropped my hair into my hand, and then nestled into my satchel as if he was preparing his nest for a night's rest. I looked at Order, who just shrugged, enjoying the entertainment after a long, hard day of travel. "No, friend, you cannot stay here," I said aloud to the skier. I pried him from my satchel and set him on a low branch. Immediately he uttered a slight grunt and jumped onto my shoulder. I again plucked him from my shoulder and placed him on the branch. He jumped onto my bag. We repeated this dance with increasing distance between myself and the creature. I would place him on a branch, hold him temporarily in place, walk away, and then he would hop from one branch to another and then back onto my head or shoulder or satchel. We did this maybe 10 times. "I think our party has room for one more," Order said. "You did save his life, after all. He owes you." "I have always been fond of skia," I said. "I've just never been one for pets. In this case, however, it seems I have no choice, at least for now. Surely the thing will return home when we leave the marshland." So now we trekked onward, and a few minutes later I emerged from the trees on the edge of the marshland, the most ridiculous sight ever observed. Wet and exhausted, with 2 bald patches on my head, a dagger in my hand, accompanied by what seemed to any potential onlookers like a common house cat by my side, and with a skia perched like a bird upon my shoulder. Surely any onlooker would think me mad, and in honesty, I'm unsure that I would disagree with her. "Order, please tell me you know where to find your friend," I said, cold and in need of bathing, a meal, and rest. "Well, I know not that she's even here, Marin, I must admit, but I know where to look," he said. He pointed with his tail in the direction of a small building on the edge of town. "There? That's only a house. If she lives in a house, how are you unsure?" "The exterior is misleading," he responded, and forward he went. I pushed the skia off my shoulder, thinking he'd scurry back into the marshland home, but he hit the ground and darted instantly back to me, crawling up the leg of my pants and jumping into my satchel. "I guess we're stuck with you for the time being, friend," I said aloud, and then realizing I had just spoken to a rodent, felt embarrassed. I, and the skia, I suppose, caught up with Order as he neared the front of the humble, unassuming house. It was built of wood, not unlike any other house nearby. It seemed to have been erected many years ago, as the windows were cracked in places. There was rot on some of the wood on the doorstep, mildew in several places, and a bit of moss growing in some of the spaces between planks. The entire community seemed to look this way, from what I could see as it was late. There seemed to be an effort to make the small town presentable and welcoming, though. There were lanterns burning that lined the road down the middle of town, which was of dirt, but well maintained, and there was a town square with a small gazebo that presumably housed town meetings. It was quaint, cute, familiar to me. This made what lay on the other side of the door to this house all the more surprising. When Order knocked in a particular pattern with his paw, and the door opened seemingly automatically to reveal an empty room of solid stone with a massive torch-lit staircase leading down into darkness. He looked back sort of smugly, grinning upon seeing my face of awe. "Order, what is this?" I asked, unable to believe what I was seeing. "It's a staircase, friend. Come along," he replied sarcastically, and he bounded down the steps, leaving me to catch up. The stairs seemed ancient and extremely out of place in the humble village. They were of a stone with which I was unfamiliar, polished but dull, almost like clouded glass. I hurried down the steps to meet Order, who I found at the base of the stairs before 3 corridors, noticeably pondering which to take. He was making audible, frustrated noises, and in the moment I realized I had heard almost no sounds ever come from Order. We communicated through Thesmerda, and he was nearly silent otherwise, apart from his characteristic giggle he uttered on occasion. "What bothers you, Order?" I asked. He did not turn around. "I thought I would remember upon our arrival is all," he replied. "One of these halls leads to the great below and then to Tyria. The other 2 are dummy halls, rigged with traps and triggers. I actually argued against their being built in the first place, but now I begrudgingly see their value. Naturally, I want not to make a wrong move." "The great below? That seems to me a rather simple name for something so elaborate. This place is unbelievable," I said. "Also, why are there dummy halls?" "Well, to keep intruders from stumbling in by accident, and to keep idiots like me from entry," he said. He paused and then added, "The name was not my choice either." "Well, which way do we go then?" I asked. I'm truly at a loss. I don't know. We went to great lengths to keep the halls indistinguishable from one another, and anyone who would remember which hall is the right one is either dead or already inside, he said. Just then, the skia stirred in my satchel. I'd forgotten it was in there. I looked down to see its little head pop out of the bag, and then it jumped down onto the floor and approached Order. Of course, Order said. Yes, friend, thank you. You shall see a door at the end. The other two will just have an empty wall. No one is intended to make it that far anyway. The skia looked at Order for a moment in understanding, and then took off full speed down one of the 3 halls. I turned to Order in astonishment. I'm sorry, I said, but it seems as though you just spoke to the skia. Further, it seems as though it spoke to you. That could not be possible, right? Surely I've not completely lost my mind, no? Well, I cannot answer your last question, Order responded, but as for the former, I've always been able to speak to the skia. You can too, if you would listen. He's called Bomb, by the way. I can speak to skia? I asked. Yes, Marin, you have no tail for me to pull. You can speak to and understand all sorts of creatures, such as the wonder of Thesmerida. You're talking to me now, after all. Skia are not able to form much in the way of words in our tongue, but you'll find that they, and many simple creatures, understand more than most think they would. I suppose it made sense in retrospect. I'd always had an affinity for small creatures, and they always seemed to have a similar one for me. I presumed they had an understanding of me which I was not yet aware at the time. This news excited me, for though I was not one for pets, it was not due to a lack of interest. I was just never in one place long enough to justify keeping one around. I had also always felt morally conflicted about considering a living creature a subordinate. I considered it wrong, in a way, to own a pet, but a companion, one with whom I could communicate, one whom could be a friend, an equal, a part of the family, that certainly appealed to me. Is that why the skia, or why Bomb, followed us from the marshland? Did you ask him to do so? I asked. Not exactly, I think he just likes you, Order replied. At that moment, Bomb came scurrying back down the hall and met us. He and I locked eyes, and I heard him, in the same way I heard Order all this time, in my own mind's ear, and not audible like normal speech. Hall, empty, try next, going, Bomb, going, he said. I smiled, truly happy for the first time in quite a while. This was probably my favorite development of the strange last few days. Good job, Bomb, let us know what you can find, I said. He nodded, took off down the next hall, and left Order and I waiting. I cannot hide it, Order. This is quite fun for me. Talking to creatures like skia or birds or heshelges, that is the dream of every child. All are forced to relinquish that dream as they grow up, but here I am with you and with the privilege to recapture such an awesome fantasy. I'm grateful. I'm glad to hear this, Order said, but I worry that the joys of our meeting and of our journey may soon be overshadowed by great pains. Enjoy what you can while things are calm. It will not be the case for much longer. He paused and then backpedaled slightly. That is not to say there is not joy to be had on our quest. Just know that our mission is a daunting one that will place us in peril, and one that will require great strength and sacrifice. I understand, I said, and as I told you, I'm willing to do what it takes. I'm just glad to have stumbled upon one of those joys now. Bomb returned from his exposition down the second hall. Door! He said, excitedly. He scampered up my pants leg and then onto my shoulder, and I gave him a pat on the head. Well, thank you for your help. I'm Marin, Bomb, I said. It's nice to meet you, officially. Marin, Bomb, help, for friend, Bomb said, seemingly relieved to know I could now understand him. Order rose and stretched. Well, I suppose you two are even now, he said with a smile, and began down the middle corridor. Bomb hopped down from my shoulder into my satchel, and we followed. Alright, I will stop there before this video reaches the 3-hour mark, I'm sure. Hopefully this was fun for y'all. If you're interested in this series, please let me know in some capacity so I know whether or not I'm like bothering everyone, or if there are at least a few people out here who want it to continue, out there who want it to continue, who are interested in like the Q&A stuff, or who want to see the book, where the book goes or whatever. I know that these videos will never be the most viewed things on my channel, but it would be nice to know if there are at least a couple of you weirdos out there as nerdy as I am. So, thanks for watching. Thank y'all for everything. Thanks for watching. See y'all next time.